Welcome to this episode of Roots and Wins. I'm Jennifer He, your fractional Chief Marketing Officer.
I'm David Solomon, your Fractional Chief Revenue Officer.
We've spent the past several episodes focusing more on marketing. Today, we're going to talk about sales.
Oh, not a dirty word, salespeople, I promise you.
And before today's episode, we were discussing about the topic. Um, I mentioned, a company's sales process should work well with your buyer's buying process. And David, you had your first reaction on it.
Yeah. So there are two things we need to understand when it comes up to B2B sales. Okay. And when you're talking retail, and a person comes in to buy, you know, you know what it's going to be like. If I'm going to go buy a t-shirt, their buying process is extremely simple. They're the buyer, they make all the decisions, but how you engage that individual is the key. In B2B, there's an extra layer. And so we have the personality of the buyer, absolutely. But the company has put a process into place of what they expect to have, how they expect to be approached, and also their process of the decision making. So it's not that simple, and every business is very different.
Mhm.
So if you do not have an understanding of both of them and work towards both of them, you're likely to fail.
Mhm. Um, I just wanted to point out, my friends at retail might disagree with the sales process is easier. It
I'll,
might be
I'll,
more like
Maybe
mini
more streamlined, I should say, rather than easier. Absolutely. And I apologize to everybody in
and
retail.
more instant. It might happen in 10 minutes or half an hour, but for B2B, it might happen, right? The length of that process might be longer.
My apologies to my retail friends. I did not mean to say it was easier to be in retail. It just seems that the relationship is more direct, and the
Yeah.
individual you're speaking to is likely to be the decision maker and will do the entirety of the process is
Hmm.
in one individual.
Hmm.
In B2B, it's not necessarily one individual. And
Hmm. Yeah.
there's where the
There are
complexity starts to begin.
decision makers and decision making
Absolutely.
team, right?
100%.
And
100%.
you mentioned two concepts, buyer personality and then buyer process. Uh,
Right.
can you elaborate
Sure.
more on those two concepts?
Look, if you've done selling, or if you ever bought and you think about it yourself as a person, how do
Mm,
you want to be approached? I'm an emotional guy when I'm talking to people. When I'm being sold to or presented to, my emotions diminish. I am much more logical. I'm much more, structured. I might be looking for, some proof. Buyers today are not uniform. There's no one way a person thinks. We're a
mhm,
blend of something. And so if you think of accountants, they tend to be more risk averse and data driven. If you talk to engineers, they're technical. If you talk to teachers, salespeople, we tend to be more emotional. And if you talk to CEOs, a lot of them are more visionaries. So you
mhm,
can't, the buyer's personality, one of those four will stand out more than anything else. It's decoding that personality, especially in that in that first meeting. It's hard to decode what that individual is like.
mhm,
And so the question is, how do you go in? How do I approach a buyer
mhm,
when, I've never met them before, I don't know them. But the key is to uncover by asking a lot of questions, by having conversations and discovering whether, their tonality, and asking how they make decisions and how they think will lead you to understand the buyer's personality.
mhm,
That is the first step, because if you can't get through that buyer, the process of the organization is irrelevant. You
mhm,
have to understand who you're talking to and
mhm,
how you're going to approach them
mhm.
before you get into the business process. Because um, if people don't like you, they won't buy from you. Let's just be realistic.
Yeah. So, question here: buyers have buyer personalities, right? So our sales team, our sales reps have personalities as well. So when
Hmm.
you see those two personalities clash,
Oh,
uh,
it could easily. They're
How do
very
we help the sales team deal with that, or how do we help management to manage that?
that's a great question. What I've told my salespeople is before you even go out the door, let's talk about who these people, what they could be buying.
Mm,
Are we dealing with it? Again, what is the role of the individual? If the role is an engineer, a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, like I said, a teacher, a consultant, we have a general idea of how they would, what their personalities are likely to be. And we have to become chameleons, Jennifer. We cannot approach people the way you want to be approached.
mm,
Like I just said, how you would look at me and you say, oh, David is bubbly and energetic. So I'm going to come in with that same energy.
mm,
You'll turn me off.
mm,
But if I'm talking to somebody who I know needs energy and emotional, and I've met these customers along the way, these buyers along the way, I could match them. And so it's really, like I said, we have to be chameleons in this game because we might find that bubbly accountant, which I know is rare, or that personal lawyer, which again could be rare, but they exist, and you have to be ready to pivot. So it's critical as part of the what we say the pre-call planning is not only to understand the business and the client, but the possible personality we're going to have when we get there. Then when we get arrive there and we're talking to them and we're asking these open-ended questions, which is the don't ask yes no questions, but like
yeah.
a lot of like, hey, so tell me about the
To find
company,
out more about that, who that person is.
tell me about the company, tell me about your processes, tell me. And as they're talking, you got the clues. Are they using more adjectives? Are they emotional?
Hmm.
Are they talking like how are they talking is the way they want to they might want to be spoken to. So
Hmm.
again, we want to mimic or mirror their personalities and be understanding and be patient
Hmm.
because they might say something and you got to be careful not to misinterpret the clues, but watch the body language, the hands, the expression of the hands. I talk with hands
Hmm.
when people tend to talk with hands. People are very expressive. Some people are just their arms are crossed, so they're
Hmm.
closed. You have to look at the body, you have to listen to the voice, you have
Hmm.
to pay attention to the intonation.
Hmm.
This takes practice. But before you walk out the door, it's critical to have an evaluation and like your team, your sales manager, the business owner, everyone has already had an experience with these buyers.
Hmm.
Take that information, take those experiences before you walk in the door, and at least that's a starting point before you really get to size up who the buyer, like what their buyer's personality is completely.
Hmm.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, this must be a skill set of a salesperson, right? To identify personalities, and also to identify the indicators. There might be some conflicts. So, what are the indicators? Like, you know, like should send alert signals to me if there are differences. Because I understand, like, it's easier to sell to somebody who has rapport with you.
Oh, 100%. And when you come up with personalities, when the name of the game is to try to get them to speak. So, the old expression, I have two ears and one mouth, so listen twice as much as you talk. And so it's all about questions.
Mhm.
And if you ask the right questions, and again, back to pre-call planning, is make sure you've built out a bank of questions
Mhm.
with your team, your sales manager. Hopefully, you have a playbook in there. Those questions are there. That'll
Mhm.
get your client to speak.
Mhm.
And during that conversation, as they get more comfortable and they realize that you really do understand their needs, they will become more comfortable with you and more open with you. But
Mhm.
the key is to ask a question. Now, I had an experience where I went with a client to visit their prospect,
Mhm.
and they said, David, do you mind leading the conversation? I said, sure. And
Mhm.
I sat down, and my first question is, so, sir, please tell me about the business and what's going on. And it took him 15 minutes to tell me the whole thing. And I went, holy mackerel, that guy took 80% of my questions. But I got the emotion, I got the affinity to the organization, the connection. This wasn't even his business. He's an employee.
Mm.
His loyalty, how many years he's been there. He knew But he also said to me, I understand my business.
Mhm.
I know what we need. And I
Mhm.
went, okay. So if I have to change
That's
his
the
mind,
keywords.
yeah,
I
exactly.
know what we need.
Right. So if I have to change his mind, what do I need to do?
Mhm.
What is going to be his pain point that
Mhm.
and so then that's the digging, and that's what you have to keep doing is dig and dig and dig.
Mhm.
Never challenge,
Mhm.
never say yes, but I mean
Mhm.
that's horrifying.
Yeah.
But always ask the questions so that you find out what their real needs are and
Mhm.
how they want to be spoken to. It's again body, voice, intonation, hands,
Yeah.
comfort. Put it this way: if they're paying attention to you, Jennifer, and they're looking you right in the eye, you've got
Mhm.
their attention. But if they're on their computer or on their phone and they're not paying attention,
Yeah.
you've lost them.
Yeah.
These are critical clues that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah. Um, that's a personality part.
Hmm.
And also then there is a process, right? So
Oh,
you
yeah.
need to move them along the purchasing process because you have a job to do. Um, so how does that work with companies? So when you craft strategies with business leaders, how would you go about doing it?
Great question. And it's a question of the customer journey and the question of how their process is. So if I look at, and by the way, every business is completely different. So
Hmm.
I used to be in the toy business. And for us, our process was we needed a component. We went out to find out who had the best delivery, price, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
It didn't matter. The purchasing agent had the power.
Hmm.
That was rare, but the
Hmm.
purchasing agent had all the power.
Hmm.
If you go, for example, and you want to sell a scoreboard to a stadium,
Hmm.
you have to deal with who the people are using it,
Hmm.
who are the influencers in the decision, and then who are the decision makers. And
Hmm.
that could be a dozen people.
Hmm.
And now you have a whole other process to deal with. It's not, oh, I'll submit a quote and good luck to you.
Yeah.
I
So
now have
is
to
it like you need to map your sales process to their buyer process?
100%. I can say to them, oh, look, I got this. You want to buy this? And they're going to go, great. Can you show it to the people who are going to use it?
Hmm.
Then we have a meeting with the people, often in large expenditures like airplanes, scoreboards that take very long to make the decision.
Hmm.
You might find that the CFO or the VP finance is involved. VP
Hmm.
finance isn't going to use it. It's not a decision maker,
Hmm.
but because they're the one handling the budget and they're an influencer.
Hmm.
The CEO might be an influencer,
Hmm.
might be the decision maker. You have to recognize who's got what role and appeal to that individual.
Hmm.
And each one could be completely differently. And let's just go back to the scoreboard
Hmm.
scenario. I might talk to the head of marketing and say, you know what, you can provide all these promotional things and you can create great client engagement and
Hmm.
it's look at the sponsors you could put out here. And then you go to the technical team and say, look how simple it is and look how it integrates well. And now you're talking a technical conversation. And then you go to the sales team and say, listen, you could sell this kind of program and this kind of program and this kind of program. Those are the users. None of them are decision makers.
Hmm.
And then you're going to the influencer who says, well, you can amortize it over 10 years and da. And then the owner is the one who makes the decision because it's such a capital expenditure and say, look, everybody's happy. Everybody feels comfortable. Here's and this is why you need to understand the process. The bigger the expenditure, the more capital expenditure it is, the more
Hmm.
people are going to get involved. And so whether
Hmm.
you're selling large scale equipment,
Hmm.
airplanes, scoreboards, it's one process.
Yeah.
But if I'm selling toilet paper to your company, very likely you do not have 10 people involved.
Yeah. Don't
It
need.
all depends on what you're selling, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it sounds a lot of work, right? You need to map out the process, and before that, you need to understand your buyer personalities, group them together.
It
Uh,
actually goes a step further. You can go to, if you think about every airline or
mhm,
every stadium you go to, generally they all have the same process. but
Mhm.
it's tweaked a little bit different depending on who you go speak to and how they
Mhm.
handle it.
Mhm.
So you need to be prepared to be flexible and not so rigid.
Mhm.
Personalities and processes
Mhm.
are always in flux. And so you got to be prepared to change and adapt. And if you can't, if you're rigid, you're not going anywhere.
Mm.
So you need to, this is the chameleon part of understanding. And this is sales, this is the talent you need to have, but also the technical understanding that
Mhm.
your buyer is the key to understanding the process as well as the personalities. Because
Mhm.
if you sit with the buyer and saying, so tell me what your process is.
Mhm.
Well, we have this person, this person, this person, and this role, this role, this role. Tell
Mhm.
me, what are
Mhm.
they looking for? How can I help them? What are their expectations?
Yeah.
Now you're prepared. Ask questions. They may not answer you,
Mhm.
but if you do ask and get the information, it's
Mhm.
invaluable.
So how do you prepare your sales team? Like, do you help businesses? We write it down to have a playbook
100%.
that
And
it can be
yeah,
replicated.
yeah, you need any good organization
Mm.
has done it. Now, if you're a new company or a startup, you've been doing it for a year or two, tough to get a playbook, but you should have one anyways,
Yeah.
because all the experiences, all the stories, all the processes, the types of personalities, who's the buyer, why
Yeah.
they say yes, why they say no, all that should be in your playbook.
Mm.
If you've been doing this for a number of years, you've got the experience. And
Mhm.
so you know what works, you also know what doesn't work. And
Mhm.
so the key here is in your playbook. If you map out the customer journey and you know that a sales cycle could take years,
Mm.
which in some organizations it can, what's that going to look like? But again, if I go back to when I'm selling a commodity like toilet paper, paper towel, whatever,
Yeah.
it's not much of a process here.
Mhm.
It's a lot of banging on doors and hoping for people to buy and on a price point. It's a
Mhm.
different thing. But the
Mhm.
more complex, the more it's a relationship driven arrangement between the buyer and the seller. The more complex it gets, the more you have to have all of that information down because it's so critical.
Mhm. Mhm. So, one more question. How long does it take? Let's say, we're not talking about commodity kind of product or toilet paper, like small to medium businesses,
Right.
B2B, different like
Mhm.
there's industry matters, right? So ballpark wise, like if we want a sales process mapped out with buyer process, how long does that take? I think business leaders want to know that.
Look, business leaders need to. The question's almost on the reverse. Is so if I've been in business for 3 to 5 years at
Mm,
least,
mm,
I can map it out in minutes. I would take all my sales team. I would take everybody around the table and saying, let's talk about the buyers' personalities. Let's talk about our top 5, 10 buyers' personalities.
yeah,
What do
yeah.
they all have in common?
Mhm,
What's their pain point? What makes them happy? What are they looking for? And so on and so forth. And then we do the process. And again, same 5 to 10 companies, 20 companies, whatever it is, your top 20%,
mhm,
whatever it is you need,
mhm,
and map out what is in common. Now, there are outliers. I will say it again. There are always an outlier who's going to say, we do it a little bit differently, whatever. But who is the decision maker? Who are the influencers? Who are the users of
mhm,
your product that you need to speak to?
mhm,
Um, and if you have that information, map it out. Take a
mhm,
big whiteboard,
mhm,
map it out,
mhm,
challenge each other,
mhm,
and especially the sales team. What have you discovered? What challenges have you faced? Where will be the bottleneck? Who
mhm,
is going to be the one holding back on the decision? Who's going to be the one who's the biggest influencer of the decision? Who is
mhm,
the most important user of what you're about to sell? Everything, the more you can put out there, the more efficient you become on your next sales call.
mhm. So, okay, so the benefits is better sales and faster sales. Is
It
that
may not be
how
faster. It may not be faster
Mm,
because you can get a fast no. But what you really want to understand is if you want to be in the running again, and we're not talking about toilet paper again, we're
yeah.
talking about a real a continuous relationship that has with the company.
Mhm.
It's about establishing trust. And when you show in that you understand their process, and that you understand it won't be evident that you understand their personalities. People tend not to realize, hey, that person's talking the way I want to be spoken to.
Mhm.
It's not it. We tend to be negative, so it's like, "Ugh, I don't like the way they're speaking to me."
Mhm.
That will get, but they understand our process. They understand our needs, our pain points, our pricing, our deliveries, our all of the processes. They understand it. Now you are in the running for the partnership.
Mhm.
Just remember, very often they already have a supplier or a partner. You might be displacing somebody.
Mhm.
So to get over that, to make that leap, you really got to go above and beyond to understand these processes, understand how they use it, how they will use it. If
Mhm.
you can find a way, for example, to tell your client or your prospect, we found a better way, a more efficient way, we could save you money, we
Mhm.
could, you've now become more valuable because you understood their processes.
Yeah.
But it starts with mapping it and then validating it with
Mhm.
questions.
Mhm.
That's the key.
Mhm. Thank you, David. And before we conclude today's episode, I have one more question for you. Is one takeaway point for our audience, who can uh, take immediate action on their
Immediate action.
processes.
If, map it out. Write out your playbook.
Exactly.
Like, I can't emphasize that enough.
Mhm.
The stories you have in your head need to be translated into a document. I use this expression a lot. If you are the person with all that information and you get hit tomorrow by a beer truck,
Mhm.
great, you get hit by a beer truck, but what you're now, all that is gone.
Yeah.
It needs to be in a document somewhere. It needs to be shared with everybody.
Mhm.
Everyone needs to get involved in understanding it,
Mhm.
tested it, kick the tires,
Mhm.
come back with the experience, rewrite it. The playbook is never is not a it's not the Bible, people, but it like your Bible.
Mhm.
The Bible doesn't change, but your playbook will change because
Mhm.
as you grow and evolve and you get into new markets, you're constantly adding and you're constantly modifying. And your market today might work with one process. You go to another market, it'll work with a different process. But if you don't write it out and everybody doesn't see it, wow,
Mhm.
that could be very painful when it
Mhm.
comes to growth.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
No,
And
kind of,
yeah, I'm gonna go back myself to map out that process as well. And thank you very much for your insights.
thank you
And
for the
for
interview.
yeah, for our audience, how many buyer personalities do you have in your organization? And are your sales processes flexible enough to match your buyers' processes? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, thank you.
Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.